we're talking about navigating conflict. And navigating conflict is an important skill that we all should have. And to be able to understand conflict at a bigger, complex concept is important for life in general. It's not an easy thing to do. It's not a comfortable thing to do. So you shouldn't approach it as something that is easy. Some of the slides in this lecture are pulled from other sources, so not everything is going to be from the book, but most of it is. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get started. First off, conflict is an inevitable part of any workplace or personal relationship. Understanding how to manage conflicts effectively is crucial for maintaining positive connections and fostering growth. So, the definition of conflict is an expressed struggle of interconnected parties who perceive incompatible goals and preference or interference, I should say, from each other in attaining those goals. So we're going to break down each part of this phrase or this definition a little bit on a more minuscule level. So when we look at the word or the phrase expressed struggle, what we're looking at is a verbal indication that there is a struggle happening. So, for example, if person A is listening to person B and person B says something that person A does not like, or it's offensive, person A, in to make sure that person B understands that there's a conflict brewing, needs to express to the other person that they're not happy with that comment. So it needs to be a verbal expression of a struggle or conflict for there to be conflict. Next, the interconnected parties in a group system. So the interconnected parties are the people who are involved in the conflict in the group. This means that for a conflict to exist, the behavior of one or more parties must produce consequences for the other party or parties. So if someone in your group is creating conflict or making conflict, that person needs to be corrected by the other group members, and that's where the interconnected parties comes from. What we're also going to look at is the interference from each other. So obviously we are part of a group. Um, so if we are getting in each other's way, that's obviously causing conflict, and it's not allowing us to obtain our shared goal. Types of conflict. So we have destructive conflict, which is characterized by dominating, escalating, retaliating, competing, defensive, and being inflexible in our communication. And then we have constructive. It's characterized by a we orientation. It's de-escalating, it's cooperative, it's supportive. So one thing to note about destructive and constructive conflict, it's all about the communication that's happening. The principal difference is how competent the communication is when transacting the conflict. So when the conflict is expressed, how competent are we in communicating or wanting resolution? Obviously, conflict can remain constructive even when discussion becomes somewhat contentious. So even in constructive conflict, it might still be contentious. It might still be uncomfortable. And the key here is not to look at conflict as always being difficult or awkward. It should always be looked at from a place of resolution. The principal focus in constructive conflict is on trying to achieve a solution between the struggling parties or people that is mutually satisfactory to everyone. So that is our end goal whenever we have conflict. Here are some other types of conflict. These are not in the book, but we have interpersonal. So that is interpersonal conflict occurs between individuals, often due to personality clashes or differences in communication styles. Then we have intrapersonal, which is more or intrapersonal in our mind. So it's conflict within oneself involving internal struggles. So it's not really an issue with another person or another human being. It's an internal mental struggle. Okay. Then we have intergroup, which arises between different teams or departments within an organization. So, an example of this would be the different departments at Sierra College. So, the communication department, political science department. If there was for some reason, a issue between the two departments, that would be an intergroup struggle or conflict because we're all a part of the Sierra College campus, right? An organization. Intra-organizational looks at conflict within the structure of or policies of an organization. So if there was a policy that was given to us by the administrator that we didn't like, then we would have a inter-organizational struggle. Common causes of conflict is miscommunication, differences in values, limited resources, and divergent goals. So, obviously, conflict comes from miscommunication because if we don't know that there's a conflict brewing and that person who is experiencing the conflict doesn't express it, then the other parties, the other people don't know that there is a conflict. That's why it needs to be expressed. We can't have people sitting in the dark wondering what's happening. Negative effects of unresolved conflict includes decreased productivity, which is obviously what we don't want in a group. Conflicts that are left unresolved can hinder collaboration and productivity. Low morale when conflict is ignored or pushed to the wayside, it can feel dehumanizing and make people not want to be a part of the group. And it also ends in damaged relationships. So unresolved conflicts strain relationships and erode trust. The benefits of conflict resolution, so the reasons why you should take this seriously and try to always resolve conflict, is because it strengthens relationships and it boosts innovation. It fosters effective team communication, promotes understanding for stronger relationships, harmonizes diverse perspectives to spur creative solutions, and it also entails mastering conflict resolution to create a positive environment. So, a positive group climate, right? Which is a term that we've been using this whole semester. Conflict resolution strategies we have accommodating, collaboration, compromise, and smoothing. Accommodating is showing high concern for social relationships, so that's showing high concern for social dimension, but low concern for task accomplishment. So that would be low concern for task dimension. Collaboration, working together to find a mutually beneficial solution. Compromise, finding middle ground where both parties make concessions. So obviously, with compromise, there should be both parties should be losing something in the agreement. It's not a win-lose situation, it's a lose-lose. So if person A wanted bananas for lunch and person B wanted strawberries for lunch, maybe the compromise is that we have different fruit, orange or something. Obviously, that's a dumbed down version, but both parties lose, but maybe there's a mutually compromise or mutual exclusively compromised agreement to be okay with oranges. Smoothing, the act of calming the agitated feelings of group members during a conflict. Smoothing also should have a little asterisk next to it because it's not only about calming the individual, it's also about addressing their concerns so they feel heard. A couple other types of strategies that are not listed here is avoiding, which is a communicating style of withdrawing from potentially contentious and unpleasant struggles. So, someone who uses the avoiding conflict style shows little concern for both task and social relationships in groups. Um, and sometimes avoiding is appropriate as a resolution strategy. That's why it is a strategy. The other one is competing. So this is a win-win or a win-lose situation. So it's forcing your will on others. So basically, you're strongholding them. You're wanting to resolve the conflict by indicating how you're right and they're wrong, and therefore people should take your side on things. So it's a win-lose. Someone using a competing or forcing style shows high concern for task dimension, but low concern for social dimension. Communication techniques. You should use I statements. We talked about this earlier in the semester. Expressing thoughts and feelings using non confrontational language is always a plus when trying to resolve conflict. Avoid blame. So you shouldn't be blaming or assigning blame. You should only be expressing yourself from your point of view. So you shouldn't be saying, um, you make me feel this way. You can say, I feel this way when you do X. Okay. And then nonverbal cues. These are a great way of determining if someone is expressing or experiencing conflict, although there should be an asterisk here too, because it depends. So our nonverbal communication can be very um, ambiguous, as the nonverbal group will probably tell you during their presentation. It can be a good thing, but it most of the time it could be a little bit ambiguous. Um, so that's where you can run into some issues. But by embracing conflict resolution techniques, we can transform conflicts into opportunities for growth, understanding, and stronger relationships. And that is our lecture.